and government like this. And most of the general people, they don't know about this right to information act, and then that this is their right. They don't know, and the most of the journalists they are using, and then most of the even in commission, even in government body, general people they don't want to get information. Even very few, very few information they want. Maybe in a year or 2 or 3 they are demanding information from their side. If, most of the journalists they are using, if they didn't get information, they try to get through this channel. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. The speakers are extremely polite. They don't need a reminder from me, and I don't need therefore a reminder from you. It works perfectly here. See how I'm controlled? Friends, Nepal has shown how a good legislation without a movement cannot survive. And I think what all Mongolia was struggling for and India said they were struggling for, Nepal has it. Friends, I think this is the best note a 2-day meeting on inclusion, participation and rights can end. And this is definitely, Nazreen, you were a tribute not only to your own life, but to the hundreds of women human rights defenders across Asia and the globe. You spoke on their behalf, you expressed what they would love to express, and you said it in the manner that nobody else here could have said it. Thank you very much. It was a testimony, and I think you really and truly follow in your own style the legacy of George Fernandes in the way that you have done it. I'm really extremely pleasantly moved by all what you said, which for me is a very, very deep testimony, because we are all human rights defenders here in our own milieu. And I think sometimes there are very rare people like you who move us to the extent that we need to continue further. And that was you. And that was you on top of the Everest. And that was there. I don't want to say more because I think you said it, and the panelists, and I'm sure my friends from Nepal would have respected what you said, because there are several countries which have these views, but I think what you said is that we will never allow our people's security and sovereignty to be taken away from us. That was your assertion. You come from a country where we were supposed to go on behalf of the Asian Democracy Network tomorrow for a fact-finding. We don't have a visa. There was nobody to invite us for a visa, and we did not want to do it on a tourist visa. And therefore, we understand not only what you testified. I think people from Bangladesh who are in very difficult circumstances face the situation that you said. And I think all of us here, gathered here, want to show that we are open to solidarity of all peoples in different countries, particularly women who fight as defenders and stand in solidarity. I open the House for first 3 questions, only questions. The Honorable former Minister is already here, and therefore in order to respect time, if there is something which is really in terms of a question, we will move. I saw a hand there. I saw a second hand there. Sir, and a third hand there.
I'm S.N. Chattopadhyay. I have 2 very simple questions. The one is, qualitatively speaking, what is the profile of accountability? The question is, what is the profile of accountability under RTI? Does it bring out the fault lines? My second question is on transparency.
what is the meaning of transparency? Just to give information, or to also address the concern behind the question? I'll give only one example. Recently, I have come across, in reply to an RTI question, a 2,000-page compendium was sent. Is there any antidote to this kind of irresponsibility?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. The second question, we take the 3 questions and then we go to the answers. The first question by Venkat, the second question by Lor.
I'm Budiul Alam Majumdar from Bangladesh, and I want to commend Wasfia. You make us proud, okay? And we are really happy. The leadership that you are showing, and she's an upcoming young leader, and we are really, really proud. And now I have a question. You know, the Indian Information Commission has declared the political parties as public authority. And inspired by that, I personally, on behalf of Sujan, requested the audited statements of our political parties. And the Election Commission refused. We went to the Information Commission, they refused. And so we filed the first case before the High Court. It's the hearing date is April 15th. So the first RTI case before the High Court. I want to know what happened. How come this reversal on the part of the Information Commission of India? And that really let us down greatly. And we are really inspired.
Yeah, third question to Venkat, of colleague there. The mic there, please.
Hi, I'm Nishan Dimel from Verite Research in Sri Lanka. We are one of the organizations that's really trying to learn from the Indian experience of RTI and seeing whether we can influence the legislation appropriately. But the question I have is really, I realize listening to all of you all, and from the experience of different countries, that legislation isn't everything. That there must be another dimension of social and civil society activism or action that makes RTI work. And I want to ask you, can you try to unpack what those dimensions are? When you spoke about the case of the woman who used RTI, you said somebody had educated her to realize that it's not just a grievance redress mechanism. So there was some other forces at work in India that made RTI work, and the absence of those, has caused it not to succeed elsewhere. So looking at it from Sri Lanka's emerging experiment, I'd love to hear more on the other dimensions.
Thank you. We will, I would request Toro to start first, and then you can take both the questions.
So I think the question, I think very simple, but I think it's very, actually the answer could be complex. What is the transparency? So I don't want to give any kind of a scientific or the TI, Transparency International's, let's say, definition, but for me, what I would define as a transparency is for me, it's like a glass door where I can see clearly what's happening inside, but it's also a glass door which is always open, whereby I can come inside and participate in what's happening inside. So for me, that's what is transparency. Thank you.
There was a judgment of the Supreme Court in 1975, which was when the right to information became a fundamental right in this country. And it took 30 years since then to get the law in this country. And the Supreme Court, while saying so, said, the people of this country have a right to know every public act. Everything that is done in a public way by their public functionaries to cover with veil of secrecy the common routine business is not in the interest of public. And I think this speaks about the origins of the right to information movement, but the movement takes 30 years to settle down before the legislation actually gets through Parliament, and that too after several rounds in Parliament. Venkat?
Okay, the first question about accountability under RTI. Well, RTI is primarily a law about seeking and obtaining information, or in some instances denying information for very reasonable grounds. The only accountability that you can seek under RTI is in terms of penalty wherever the law has been contravened, and that is entirely dependent these days on the whims and fancies of the information commissions. Report after report has shown that the commissions are not using their powers to impose penalty to ensure compliance from public information officers, and the majority of the workload before the information commissions is not about the demand for sensitive information. The majority of the workload is lack of response within 30 days, not bothering to reply even after the first appeal is filed, or sometimes not even accepting your RTI application. This is the majority of cases that are coming before commissions, and that's something which the commission on its own cannot correct. What we wanted through the Right to Information law was not just create a procedure for people to keep troubling the government with information applications. The purpose of the Right to Information Act is not about just seeking information, but for the government to put information in the public domain so that people don't have to formally make requests. Now that paradigm change in the manner in which government should function has happened very hesitantly, and that is why we have this problem. But accountability demands did go beyond RTI, and that is precisely why we have had in this country something which I thought would never happen during my lifetime, the middle class coming out on the streets and demanding systemic change. I, being a student of history, always thought middle class can never be mobilized. But that's happened in India, and today you have an interesting situation where the leading lights of the newest party on the block were all once upon a time in their previous incarnation RTI activists. Now you may not agree with everything that they do, but then it has taken them from there to becoming part of the very political dynamics. And the interesting thing is they met the challenge when the political establishment challenged them to come to the electoral arena and then make their demands. They met the challenge successfully, and the people were with them. And that, I think, augurs very well for our democracy. Now, as far as the political parties are concerned, well, what can I say? First of all, the parties themselves have been very hesitant in terms of accepting this order, nor have they challenged it. Instead, they authorized the government of the day at that point of time to bring in a law to keep all political parties out, whereas the order was only about 6 national political parties. Now today the situation is that the national status of 3 of those political parties is in question. So if they lose that status, then they are out of that order also. So there is a big problem there. But I think rather than blame them, what we need to see is they may not be wanting to become transparent. Fair enough, they have an interest to protect themselves. But what about the appointed custodians of the rule of law? What about the appointed persons whose duty is to ensure that the rule of law is established in this country? There were avenues available with the Central Information Commission to go beyond their comfort zones to compel compliance from the political parties. That is something that they really did not do, and that is very worrisome, because if institutions of governance or institutions of regulation start bending down in this manner, then we cannot really expect the rule of law to become a reality for people in India. Now, as far as activism is concerned, I'm not getting into the details of it. I just want to say this. RTI in India today is not an esoteric idea. It is directly connected with people's concerns regarding their daily concerns, their right to life, their right to get their entitlements from government. So that connection is something that the proponents of the RTI movement were able to very successfully make in the initial stages. And that has had a ripple effect with success story after success story, teaching other people to join the movement and then demand transparency. And that's how, by word of mouth. In fact, the law says that the responsibility for educating people on the rights under the law is on the government, whereas government has done very little at most levels to educate people on RTI. What has been done in terms of spreading awareness is primarily through the mass media and the enormously large civil society actors group. I don't mean NGOs, I mean ordinary citizens who are not connected with any civil society organization, but because of their faith in using the system to make it work. And they holding training workshops, holding RTI melas, holding kiosks at railway stations, at metro stations, at bus stations, at village hearts, That is what has led to the popularity of this law, and then using it as a trouble-solving and a trouble-resolving tool. That is what has caught the attention of people in such a big way. And in fact, I would say this is again based on a very personal note, that if you were to conduct a survey today with just 2 questions across the country and ask, especially amongst those who don't know how to read and write, do you know whether we have a constitution in India? Probably the answers would be much less than the answer to the other question, do you know or have you heard about RTI? There would be more yeses in that context. So that is how popular this law has become. And today, I think it's high time that the compilers of various English dictionaries included one word in the dictionary, which is RTI, because today it has become a verb. I will RTI this, I will RTI that, if it does not happen. It's high time they included it in.
Nirmala?
Yes, he has already mentioned about the transparency and accountability. And I want to add one thing is we have a right to information, but we have provision the right to privacy also. But while we are talking about the right to information, and then we always think about the right to privacy. I'm talking about the nowadays, even in social media, other media, they are women are affecting this right to information. They are not protecting the right to privacy for in the case of the women especially. Thank you.
One question from the audience, last question from a lady.
From a lady.
Yes, Mona? Mona has...
Curious to know, you mentioned that RTI has played a large role in exposing the deficiencies in governance. And I'm curious to know if the RTI movement or other members in civil society are beginning to look at those in a more holistic fashion, and how you begin to address some of those kind of trends that have come out 30 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, the first major systemic change that was brought about, at least on the policy book of the government. Today, there is a requirement, it is government policy, although it's not being followed in every instance, that before laws are made or drafted and put before Parliament, there is a requirement that the laws be floated in the public domain for at least 30 days to get people to comment on them. That's a policy that was instituted by government 1 year ago. It has happened in some contexts, but doesn't happen in every case. And it is unfortunate that when it does not happen, particularly in those cases where the concerned laws or the amendments to laws are going to affect people's lives in a very big way, then there must be much more consultation. And like I pointed out in my previous example, what is this urgency to pass an amendment? Let people know what exactly is there. Convince the people. The best strength for a proposal is when you convince the people about the validity of the proposal. And then they will stand up with you just the same way they did with the Right to Information Law, or even with the 100-day employment guarantee law.
Okay, friends, we will bring this last panel to close. I just wanted to add on to what Venkat was saying and the others were saying, particularly that the movement has put so much pressure that today RTI is online for all central government's institutions in this country, and that also has an effect. I mean, you just take your mobile as you walk, and you are able to ask for very crucial information, and therefore the numbers really move. But then if you don't bring them within a movement, it is a problem. And I think Sri Lanka, which is on its march towards the completion of the 100 days, I think we'll have to also imbibe that. Particularly also building in this whole process some protection mechanism for RTI users, because then RTI users also need to be protected. And because RTI users usually are powerful, non-selfish individuals in the country, good-meaning individuals in the country, ultimately you see what happened in India, they are targeted. So we will move from here. I wanted one last word about George Fernandes once again. We are connected from different movements. I see Ravi sitting there in the hall. There was so much said about George, but I think what was not said, that he was a very strong civil liberties leader of this country. He was not only a labor leader, he was a very powerful civil liberties leader. I will never forget his days to the city from where I work and from where he used to come to address thousands of people on the issue of civil liberties, because he was a mass leader. Thank you.